Mr. Hopper, thank you for being here. I do. Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? One of the most eye-opening things for me, as I was sharing with another gentleman this morning, was a few years ago. And sometimes we know things, but we just need a gentle reminder that they're true because we don't see them. One of the things I know is that the sun is up right now. The sun's there. But a few years ago, I was on a flight, and as the airplane took off, it looked just like this. And then all of a sudden, we broke through the clouds. And that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, the top side of the clouds. Because that's what you think, well, okay, I know heaven's supposed to have streets of gold, but that looks pretty cool, okay? But what it reminded me of is that gloom in terms of our mood and things like that and our outlook oftentimes I love group dynamics and I love watching people. So just out of curiosity, has nothing to do with the presentation, raise your hand if you are sitting in the exact same spot you sat yesterday. Look at this. Look around the room. Hands down. We are creatures of habit, aren't we? That's my seat. All right? By golly. That's interesting. All right. Didn't have anything to do. But yesterday we took a little survey. We're going to start off with another one, okay? We're going to be talking about generations. And so what I'd like to ask you is, as you scan that code, I'm going to ask you which generation you're a part of. Now, it's going to have the dates on there so that you can have those. Can you not see those? I guess you can't. That's pretty tiny. All right, so the very first one, it's going to be on your phone. But if you're a builder, you were born between 29 and 45. If you're a boomer, you were born between 46 and 64. Busters, 65 and 82. Millennials, 83 and double aught. And we're going to call these the coronials, okay, because of the coronavirus. I don't think we have. Well, I think we've got one. Anyway, let's see who our audience is. My. Look at that. We can watch it in real time. That's the room. Would you have guessed that? Probably. But it's interesting to see the numbers, isn't it? It's interesting to see the numbers. So the boomers and the busters, and we'll talk about those here in just a bit. That's the room. That's the room. Excellent. Let's go to the next. We keep moving here up. We have a builder up there too. Person born between 29 and 45. Okay. All right. Aaron, can we advance to the second one? Aaron is busy. Aaron, can we advance to the second survey? Is that on there? Or do I do that? There we go. All right, here we go. Here's the next one. Which most applies to you? Are you a full-time pastor? Are you a bivocational pastor? Full-time worship leader, bivocational? Full-time youth minister, bivocational, or other? We have a lot of, I guess we call them lay leaders in this group here this morning. Does that give you a better perspective of the room? Doesn't it? Instantly. Use this as you go back to your churches. This is just one. It's called Mentimeter. There are others that you could use as well. But you can get a good read for the room, and it gives everybody a read for the room instantly. So, all right, that's what we're talking to here today. I wouldn't have guessed there were that many lay leaders, okay? Because, frankly, I couldn't tell the difference because they're all leaders. That's interesting. Very good. All right, let's go to the next slide, because I don't want to run into the things that we did yesterday. All right, here's the last one for this morning, or for this session. Please rank 1 to 5 regarding your level of agreement with each of these statements. I feel good about how my church connects with different generations we serve. The second question, I feel good about how my church connects with the various cultures we serve. Then the next one, my church attendance is currently trending upwards. And then my church currently is growing spiritually. The best thing is that these are anonymous, right? So these are your perspectives, your perception. This is what the room says. It looks like we feel better about our spiritual growth and how we're connecting with generations than perhaps our church attendance. I mean, when do you ever have enough, right? So that's always going to be, but then we take a look at the cultures, and that's one that also that we wish we did a better job of. Maybe we're doing a little bit better with generations. But it's interesting to see the perspective of the room about how we feel about these things. Well and good. Let's get into this then. All right. Intergenerational. First off, let me tell you that people are pretty much resilient. When you get into talking about differences, you better talk about similarities too. We're very, very resilient. God has equipped us to adapt to our environment. Did you realize that? Have you ever heard anybody say, you know, when I work out, I feel like I have more energy? You ever heard that? That's wrong. You do have more energy. You literally have more energy in your body. It's not just you do feel that way, yes. But you literally do. Because your body says, oh my goodness, this guy's gone crazy. He's on this exercise binge now. And we need more mitochondria to produce more energy in that body. So it literally builds more mitochondria into your body to be ready for your next crazy workout. You do have more energy. We're very resilient. That's how when an archaeologist picks up a bone out of the ground and says, this thing is 2,000 years old, and yet I can tell this is a strong person. How? Well, what happens is there's no muscle attached, but there was. Your muscles attached to the bone at a point of insertion and a point of origin, and they pull on that bone. And that bone says, oh my gosh, this guy's pretty strong. We need more bone material. And so it compacts that bone, and the bone is more dense in those areas. You can pick it up and say that was a strong person, or the other way. So in other words, your body responds to what you put onto it. So does our psyche. So God has equipped us to adapt to our environment. That's good. You got to remember to show Hee-Haw. All right, okay, good. That's good. No, that's bad. Some of you get it. As environments change, so do we. Okay? We did not grow up. We have a few of those in the builder generation here. We have a lot of boomers, and we have some busters. Each one of those generations grew up under different circumstances. Those are different environments. They're adapted differently than you are. Y'all with me? You're adapted the way you are. They're adapted the way they are. I sat there in my conference room a few years ago, and I looked across at the young lady, my HR director, very competent, very good at what she did. I treated her as a professional because she is very professional. But all of a sudden it dawned on me how doggone young she was. I looked at her and I said, if I said Barney's 5, would you know who I'm talking about? And here's what she said that offended me to the core. She said, I've heard of him. It just put into perspective 75% of my illustrations flushed down the toilet with her. I can't use them. It doesn't matter. So, different environment, and these people are different. And what we need to understand is this is not necessarily an issue of character, but experiences. They're going to be different. Some of those differences are very, very good, okay? You can weigh the good, bad, and the ugly, but they're going to be different. We must learn from each other. The people who say, well, those youngsters, they never listen to us old folks. When was the last time we listened to them? We're going to be talking about that today. If the older generation doesn't lead in this effort to learn from each other, we are not only a part of the problem, we are the majority of the problem. So we have an opportunity, we have a golden opportunity right now to, it says becoming intergenerational is our opportunity to gain back lost credibility. I mentioned this yesterday. Youngsters today, what do they think of the older generation? We've gone stark raving mad, okay? Of course, we think the same thing about them. But we have an opportunity to regain that credibility, and by doing it by being intentionally intergenerational. Let's see how we can do that. Y'all with me so far? Okay. Generational population trends. You need to understand, this is the boomers over here on the left. That's how many? 76 million. And then we had a huge drop here to the Gen Xers, okay? Because what happened was people said, ooh, that's too many babies. We're not having that many. I've got 7 siblings, okay? My wife and I have 2 kids, okay? That's it. Then we get to the next one, and we see the Gen Y, and we see they're back up there, actually more of those than the baby boomers, and then we're dropping again. Now, what does that mean? You look at those and you say, well, that's a cute little graph, but it goes up, and it goes down, it goes up, and it goes down. Here's what it means. The boomers right now, all of us silverbacks, we're in managerial positions and leadership and those kinds of things, getting ready to retire. Some of us already have, but are we really? So we're in those positions. We're in positions of leadership. Folks, as we retire, how many Gen Xers are there to take our place? Not there, okay? It's not that they don't want to work. There's not as many of them as there are of us. So, well, that creates a bit of a void. And that little plug, oh, there you go. Aaron in the back. Great. Let's give him a hand. Aaron. That is one cute baby, brother. Oh, it's good. So there's not as many Gen Xers, and then we got a whole lot of Gen Y coming in, and so, well, they're more than happy to take the reins. In fact, they come in today, they interview for the job, and next week they want promotion. They want your job. That's what they want, and they ask for it. Oh, naughty little. Anyway, they have different expectations. They do, and you better understand that. Whereas that would be insolent and disrespectful to a boomer, it is not. It is not to these others, to these younger kids, and you need to understand that culture. And if you don't speak that culture, it's one thing to be bilingual. It's another thing entirely to be bicultural. You better understand the culture of those you're working with and those that you're hiring to work with you. Otherwise, you'll be surprised. All right, so we have a void here. So now you have the Gen Yers that are coming in, and if you really want those people, and some of them will deserve it, those that are deserving, put them in those managerial positions. But what you're having is the telephones of these boomers are ringing and saying, hey, are you sure you want to stay home? Would you come back and help us do so-and-so? We're needed, guys, I'm telling you, in a big way, and I'm talking about a numerical way here. We're needed still in those kinds of positions in a whole lot of ways. So I wanted you to see that, the up-down that's created. We are forcing people into leadership positions that aren't ready for it. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, let's go to the next thing. Aaron, would you put your child back up there again? Here we go. And this is kind of just an insertion. I found this in Pew Research. Fewer than half of U.S. adults pray daily. That's a problem, okay? Just wanted to let you know. All right. Is there a gap? And just again, I don't have to convince you too much of this. Seat belts is what we grew in my generation. It went from non-existent now to click it or ticket. Okay. My dad will not wear a seat belt. Ain't happening. Neither will he touch a keyboard either. So anyway, am I right, Ed? What else has happened? Childproofing, helmets and padding, non-existent. In fact, when we rode in cars back in those days, remember that neat little space, but in the back seat up there in the back glass, you could actually crawl up there and kind of lay long ways. And yes. And if you bounced out of there, then everybody's just, well, hang on, boy. Yeah. Helmets and padding. And when you rode a bike, well, the only people who wore helmets those days were soldiers and football players. Okay? So now, well, let's go on. Screens. We had a black and white TV, and that thing had 4 legs on it, and I remember distinctly, Mama went to Western Auto and got a color TV, brought it home, and Saturday morning I can tell you the very first show I saw was Johnny Quest. Y'all like Johnny Quest? That was my first color TV show I ever saw. Cool stuff. Telephones. When the phones were tethered to the wall, we had our freedom. Now the phones are free and we're tethered to them. Think about it, folks. Think about it. Indoors versus outdoors. I mean, we go on and on with this. I've got grandkids now. My deal is I want to make those guys, they're about half feral, you know, and so I want to keep them that way. They run around outside. They think the outdoors is their bathroom too. So, I mean, I love them being outside. We don't have enough of that. But I will tell you that the world has changed. The world has changed. When the days when Mom and Dad could say, I'll see you at the end of the day, you know, come home for supper, and the sun's going down. Folks, the world has changed, and so we've become very protective, of course, and some could argue in some cases overprotective, but circumstances have changed as well. So let's not point too many fingers there. Trouble at school, well, who's fighting the fight? Is it the kid? You know, back in those days, number one, they're not calling my house, all right? And I'm going to make sure of that if I can. I don't want my parents to find out. And first off, and with 7 siblings, they didn't have time to deal with it anyway. I never remember my parents ever coming to the school, well, I can tell you, they didn't, to defend me for anything. Didn't happen. We went from LPs to cassettes to 8-tracks to digital, and now we're back to LPs again. So, anyway, yeah, there's a little bit of a gap. So we're going to go through these generations, and I'm going to do these fairly quickly. We live through because what I want to get to is answers, okay? You can look up, I'm going to give you just hitting the high spots on generations. You can look up this stuff ad nauseum, okay? I want to get to the answers at the end. Pardon me. Thank you. Got the waterfall. Thank you. All right. The GI generation, also known as the greatest generation, 1901 to 19. Do we have anybody here? Did we show those? Anybody here born as early as 1925 in the room? Okay. All right. Anyway, these people lived through the Great Depression. They fought World War II. They were driven, patriotic, team players, popularized jazz and swing music, parents of many of the boomers. And the challenge of raising the family put a premium on traits like hard work and grit. I have an invaluable gift that was given to me by one of my uncles. We had a distant relative that did some family history, and he located actual letters written by my grandmother when my father was about 5 years old, okay? And the letters written between people. Now, my dad was born in 37, so it's the early 40s when these letters were written, and it's to my Aunt Cleo, and there were 3 or 4 of them swapping letters. And as I read these letters, there were a few things that came out in every letter, and you have to understand, it really helped me enculturize or get a clear mind of what the culture was of the day. They talked about 3 things. They talked about food. And what I mean by that was, well, we found, Joe went out and picked a couple of bushels of berries today, and they sure was good, okay? Or John went out and caught him a catfish, and man, we really enjoyed that. So they talked about food, and they talked about work, you know. So-and-so, he thinks he might have him a job down the road. And so he talked about how he's going to have to start off early in the morning because not many people have vehicles. You know, we all take it for granted today. Everybody's got a car, right? Everybody's got a car. Wasn't the case. So I worked on that drilling rig down there, so if I got me that job, I better head out early in the morning because if nobody's driving and I can hang on the side of their car on the way down to the rig, I better make sure I can still have time to get there to that rig. Okay? We talked about jobs. So it's food, jobs, and the third thing we talked about, because the women were writing the letters, was babies. Okay? So-and-so sure is growing, and blah, blah, blah. They go on about, but those three things came across in the letters: jobs, food, and babies. And I thought, how we've lost something there too, haven't we? But that's the generation we're talking about right here. These are the challenges. When you talk about things like a world war taking place, the Great Depression, you think these people weren't resilient? Remember we started off saying that we are resilient and that God designed us to be able to take on and adapt to the load. And then what happened right after that? Once these people came through, after World War II, what did we want to do with our babies? Take away all of the load. Make life better. I want you to have a better life than what I had. We took away the resistance. You guys know what it takes to get stronger? When you go, got any weightlifters in here? Who lifts? Anybody? Got some weightlifters back here? Yeah. So what is that called? What kind of training is that called? Resistance training. Resistance, because it is resisting your effort. And guess what happens when you have resistance? You get stronger. We took away a lot of the resistance for those generations that followed World War II. And now we're saying, why aren't they tougher? Okay? We created this, guys. Not we, just you people in the room, but you understand what I'm saying. Our country did this. Okay? The builders, the silent generation, 29 to 45. We had a few builders, we got a few in here that answered the survey. Stock market crash, the Great Depression. Now this is when they were born. My dad is in this generation. The Dust Bowl. If you've never read The Grapes of Wrath, I'm originally from Oklahoma, and so that rings very close to home. The way he describes that. World War II, of course, had to be resourceful and build from very few resources. So conformists, they were so conformist that they were also called the silent generation through much of what took place there. Basically, they were ready to step in line and do what it took. Okay? They didn't kick against anybody, they just did it. Known for working within the system. These people got a job with the company and they stayed with it for 30 years. They retired with a pension. That's who they were. What do you mean hopping around? Why do you move jobs? My son-in-law is a computer programmer. He said if you stay more than 2 or 3 years with a company right now, people think there's a problem with you. He's not kidding. He's absolutely serious about that. So you see the dichotomy that we've created here as far as that is concerned. Core values, financial prudence. Financial prudence. I would say you can't find anybody to balance a checkbook today, but that's outdated too, isn't it? So, interpersonal respect, just treating each other with respect, determination, resilience, work ethic, analog sensibilities, that is what they had in self-sacrifice. It was programmed into them because they had resistance training constantly. Does that make them better? No, it doesn't. Do you think they wanted that resistance? Hey, give me a Great Depression. That'll help me. I'll be better because of it. Give me a world war. How about that one? Nobody asked for that. What happens, people adapt to it, and you do what you have to do. Baby boom generation. I barely caught this one, so I'm no secret. I'm an old guy. All right, so I'm a 1960 baby. So population boom occurred after World War II, and those guys came home. They came home. The 50s, parents worked to provide. You know, this is where we first came up with that Leave It to Beaver kind of an idyllic situation where now you've got, the spouse, the kids. I think they said 2.5 kids was the average. And the dog, the mortgage, that's where that whole thing happened, right after World War II. Their parents became the man, the establishment. Leave It to Beaver household was seen as ideal, and this, of course, was eventually rejected later on when we had some hippies come along. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, this is when some of this came into play. Many kids took more extreme measures in defying their parents. Vietnam War disagreements, these are the kids that are born during this time. Vietnam War disagreements, protests, love ends, the sexual revolution, psychedelic drugs, the summer of love in 1967, and of course Woodstock in 1969. How many of y'all were at Woodstock? Yeah, then admit. Were you there, sir? Oh, good. I need to talk to you later. So, was that by design or by accident? You plead the fifth. There you go. That's it, man. That's honesty right there. That's what Robin Williams said. If you remember the '60s, you weren't there. Oh my goodness. Gen Z may think of baby boomers as the out-of-touch grandparents, as in, okay, boomer, like you really have it. But this generation actually had a pretty wild youth, except for that fella, he was sick. Boomers as parents, the first generation to look at their kids' perspective growing up. Dr. Spock came out with his book in 1946 about how to raise kids, and this carried on, was really being talked a lot about. In the 60s and the 70s and so forth, about how to raise kids, and that changed things. The baby boom generation, pig and the python, and they call it that because we were going along and all of a sudden there's this big, huge rise. They recognize when dealing with them, be sure that you recognize their experience and expectations. Don't micromanage them because they feel like they know what's going on. And we'll talk a little bit more about that just in a little bit. Gen X, let's go to these guys, the baby busters. Approximately 66 million of these. This is the introduction of a birth control pill. Well, there you go. So that'll reduce it, won't it? Roe v. Wade decision, okay, that'll cut down some things. Vietnam left an ugly legacy. These are the people that are growing up during this time. Assassinations of RFK, Martin Luther King, and then a naive optimism in the country was clearly starting to fade. That idyllic leave it to Beaver kind of a thing was starting to fade. We saw something different. And they lived through the AIDS epidemic, MTV culture, and shifting landscapes that would give rise to LGBTQ. So this is all very culturally different than their predecessors. And Gen X parents were the first to use helicopter parenting style. Okay? We've got a lot of educators in here, don't we? Educators or former educators? Yes. Yes. You know what a helicopter parent is, right? Yes. Well, today they've been replaced by what? Bulldozer parents. Yeah, helicopter parents just kind of hang there and watch from a distance. Bulldozer parents, they're going to clear the path. They're going to clear that road. Yeah. Used to, we would say, don't prepare the road for the child, prepare the child for the road that's ahead of them. No, there's a bulldozer parents, we're going to make it smooth. Make it smooth. So, unlike their boomer parents who famously let their kids stay outside till the streetlights came on, Gen Xers have a tendency to be far more involved with their children's social and educational development. But again, I don't want to criticize this because we grew up in a different era, and now all of a sudden, I don't know that there was an increase in crime, honestly. That's something I need to look up. But we certainly hear more about it, don't we? We certainly hear more about abductions and things like that are horrific with kids. And it's almost as if somebody's saying, hey, these people aren't scared enough, let's give them a few more stories. And I'm not sure there's not something to that. But what I do know is we hear more about that. And people are like, oh, no, you can't just let our kids do that. And certainly nobody wants kids to be unsafe or anything to happen to it. So that's Gen Xers. That's kind of what they came through. Gen Y, and again, I will go through these fairly quickly so that we can get to some answers. Largest generation, there were 80 million of these people. Now, I do want to say, as it says here, some start the generation earlier. When I say, 1983 to 2000, some people will say, well, that was 1984 or 1986 or whatever. It depends on what you're using as criteria. You get the idea that basically it's somewhere around these dates. So you have to find something that you're looking for that is meeting your expectations, and those are the dates you use. So that's pretty close, though. Recovering from Vietnam, Watergate, and the OPEC gas crisis, the failed hostage rescue from Iran. Parents focus on safety, self-esteem, and status. These people lived through 9/11, even though some of them may not remember a whole lot of it. Remember when Amazon only sold books? The first generation to know a childhood both with and without the internet. And accused of being self-centered and impatient, they are quite community-oriented and environmentally conscious, traits being picked up by their children. So it's not just what we sometimes consider the negative, but each one of these generations are going to have some qualities about them as well. Gen Z, the iGen, okay, as an iPhone, also dubbed the Coronials, okay, and lived their entire lives in the 21st century. Entire lives in the 21st century. Guys, I remember my high school got a computer. I was a junior or senior in high school, and I remember it arrived. I think it was an Apple IIe. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It arrived in the box, and it was carried. We had an old building. It was built by the WPA in 1936. Anyway, so carried this thing upstairs like the Ark of the Covenant. There was a long entourage. It's a computer. And so, and you have to understand, in those days, I didn't have an academic bone in my body. And so as I walked up there, and they put it into the business classroom, and they shut the door, and I pressed my face against the glass to see what a computer looked like. Basically, they said, "Hopper, that's not you." Our first computer in high school. That's a true story, Sid. That's literally how that came about. So I didn't touch a computer until way after high school. They're environmentally conscious, inclusive, and accepting of others, and extremely politically aware, despite many of them not being of voting age. Okay? Gen Alpha, we don't really know enough about them yet to even say anything. Okay, those are the ones that were born 2015. All right. Now what I'm about to show you is this. What I want to show you is some answers. Now, here's the thing. I'm not the expert on this, okay? So I've done a lot of research in the past few months as I was preparing for this. And so as I was doing research, there were a couple of names that kept coming up, and one of those was this John Roberto. So I emailed him, and I said, "John, bail me out, man. I don't want the Lutherans to throw me out of the building." And so he actually, he was extremely gracious. He's up in Chicago. And so he's got all kinds of material. And so I Zoomed with him, and we talked, and he said, "Here, what's mine is yours." And so he's provided this for me to share with you. And so that's why, and all the presentations that you see from me, I will send to the bishop, and so that Anna or somebody can send those out to you guys. So you'll have this contact information. You'll have what I have. But what I wanted to do was, first off, and I told him, I said, if I use anything of yours, and he didn't require anything of me, but I said, I'm going to let them know that this came from you. So here we go. In being intergenerational, now I will tell you that I started using, as you look at your agenda, you're going to see multi-generational, because that's what I sent to the bishop early on. And the more I got into this, and the more my thought process changed. Multi-generational is this. A multi-generational church is one that we have. We have all these different generations here, and you will see a multi-generational church service, and it goes like this. This is our traditional service. This is our contemporary service. There was one that I heard the other day, and they had like 5 different services. Which one do you want to go to? Right? Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Sounds pretty good. Except for this. It's not intergenerational. Okay? There's something that boomers need to teach to millennials. There's something that Gen X, Y, Z need to teach to boomers. Okay? And we can all benefit. And if we don't, we have created a fragmented and fractured church by design. Let me give you a prime example of that. Y'all know that I come from the world of education. We have in our school district, by the way, one of my former teachers is here this morning, Mrs. Richards. She's a kindergarten teacher. Y'all give her a hand. She's a kindergarten teacher, but she worked with me quite a bit on She has worked with me quite a bit on the research project that I'm doing on culture. But nonetheless, in our school district, we have a fantastic ESL program. I mean, our kids come in, they learn, and they bump up to the top real fast. They do a fantastic job of that. Our bilingual ESL, we have about 30% ESL students. It's a pretty big number, right? That was great. With every good intent, there's what do they say? No good deed goes unpunished. Okay? What was the unintended consequence of this? The other thing was we don't have enough school spirit. We don't have enough school spirit. What's going on? There's no, our kids don't fight. What has happened? We created two schools. The kids in ESL and the kids who were not in ESL. They were not antagonistic. We didn't have problems. We didn't have fights. There wasn't a racial deal at all. They just went to different schools. And we're asking them to all support the football team. Okay? Well, there's football and there's football. Okay? Right? So what we did was we had an unintended consequence. And it happens in churches too. Well, we need to have. I'm just not going to have one of those bounce house type of worship service. So great. We're going to be over here. Well, let me tell you what you're going to have then. You're going to have a fractured and fragmented church. So, to the extent that you don't want to be fractured and fragmented, let's take a look at being intergenerational. It creates an intergenerational, you have to create the culture. Create the culture before you get specific with it. Welcoming environment of hospitality, trust, acceptance, emotional safety, and care that is conducive to promoting faith, growth, and mutual support. Okay, across generations. You have to get comfortable with listening to Gen X, Y, Z give their point of view. Mentorship, and here's a term that you're going to have to use and you're going to have to put into practice. Much of this goes well beyond what we can cover today, but understand that it has to be something called reverse mentorship. Reverse mentorship. The younger generation has stuff to teach us. Let's not be so naive to think that we have all the answers. We've got a lot of answers, and boy, we better be ready. Besides that, though, here's the deal. Will that younger generational person be more apt to listen to me if I listen to them first? Pretty common sense, isn't it? Tell me about your story. Tell me about what's going on with you. Tell me, because frankly, you don't understand, and neither do I. Think, oh, okay, because I've never seen through your glasses. I've never seen through your lenses. Tell me what that looks like. And all of a sudden, both of us just got smarter. You see what I'm saying? It's like the example we gave yesterday when we're looking at the hand. Okay, I'm right, you're right, but if we don't talk to each other, we're both only half right. We talk to each other, now we have depth. Depth perception. Build caring relationships among the generations in the church through worship, learning, service, and community events and activities. Okay? Create intentional opportunities. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, how to create intentional opportunities so that you can bring the generations together and build relationships. It involves all generations together on Sunday weekend worship. Okay? I don't know. Swallow that one. Give special attention to being inclusive of children and teens in Sunday worship, and engages all generations in leadership roles in Sunday morning. So, in other words, think past your generation. You have to think for the next one. And when you do that, you don't think of, well, we're going to have to do something for them kids. I don't know. I throw a song in there, I guess. I don't know. You have to think about what they're looking for. Going on from here, engages all generations together in learning experiences that teach the Bible and Christian tradition and form disciples of all ages in Christian identity. Isn't that what we're trying to do? How many times do you have people coming from church and they say this is what I got out of the service. What did you do for the service? What part did you play in creating this? What if it's not about what I got out of it? What if it's, what did I give? Oh no, I didn't give anything to the service this morning. If you don't give anything else, pray for the pastor, pray for everybody, pray for the service. That's giving. That's giving. But you can't give unless you think about who you're giving to and what their needs are. Now that changes things. You want to change the world, you start with you. So, nurtures the spiritual life of all generations together through the community's prayer life, rituals and blessings, brings together all generations to nurture their spiritual life. And the last one down there, engages all generations together in service to the poor and vulnerable. If you want to get kids involved in your church, just say, hey, let's go serve the needy. You got them. They're there. What time? Miss Richards. We picked up trash together, haven't we? That's a bonding moment when you pick up trash together. Isn't it? And how do we do that? We take busloads of kids out to the highway, and we're picking up trash together on Saturday morning. They'll do it. They'll do it. Or we're going to the nursing home. We're going to visit folks at the nursing home. We're going to do that. Your kids will sign up to do that if you can get any thinking adults to go with them. Your kids will do it. And if you're talking service, if you're talking helping hands, your kids will do it. I promise you. Even if you have 2 or 3 at first, after a while, hey, what are y'all doing? Yeah, they like that. Because now church is relevant. Relevant. I'm going to give you one piece here on relevance, because if I don't, I'll forget it. I'm going to tell you one of the things that opened my eyes to church. I was 13 years old. My mom had been dragging us to church for a while, right, Ed? And he didn't listen for a long time. We prayed for him. That's all the times he beat me up. I'm getting him back for it. But anyway, she took us to church, and I didn't. And I'll tell you, I absolutely did not like it. I didn't want to go back, and that was because when I went to a Sunday school class, and we had what they called. Anybody know what a sword drill is? A sword, yeah. Okay, right back here. A sword drill is, the Bible is as sharp as a 2-edged sword, right? And the sword drill is, they would say, look up the book of Hosea. And the one that could get to it first, you won that round. And they would look at, basically, how well do you know your Bible? So there was this girl that always, and she's so smart, she's so good. And I'm going like, I even know where to go. I had not a clue. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. Seriously. I mean, this was coming from a kid. Now, I didn't know my Bible. My point is, the Sunday school teachers should have been more inclusive in that and going, okay, that's cool, it's good to know, but everybody is at different places in there. It doesn't matter where you are today, just so you're at a different place tomorrow. That would have helped me, but no, she always won. And so anyway, that's what I meant about church. But we lived across the street from the football field, and anything happening at the football field, that was my domain, and Ed's too. And so I saw the lights on one night, and I walked over there. I thought, what is this? And I know how old I was, because it was 273. I was 13 years old. And it was an outdoor evangelism thing. And once I got there and saw what it was, I couldn't get out. Right? So I'm sitting there on the grass, and here's what happened. That guy was teaching something I'd never heard in my church before. He was teaching biblical prophecy. And I'm 13 years old, and it resonated with me. Do you know why? Because all of a sudden, the Bible was relevant. They said stuff would happen, and it did. They said stuff is going to happen still yet, and we see things lining up. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And the Bible was relevant. If you don't hear anything else about generations, know this. Your kids will listen to you when you teach relevance. They'll eat your pizza like I told you yesterday. They'll eat all the candy. They'll play the games because that's what kids do. But they will latch on when you talk about things that are relevant to them today, stop. I'm just going to say, don't skirt the hard issues. Deal with them head on. If you don't answer their questions, they'll find those answers somewhere else. Is that what you want? So, as churches, we are bound to teach truth. And kids want truth, and they're tired of being pampered and pandered and actually even lied to. Teach them the hard things. And the hard things are good things. And when I say hard, I mean, wow, that's good. That's neat. I can chew on it. All right. An intergenerational culture engages all generations together in service to the poor. Okay, we talked about that. Strategies for becoming intergenerational. All right. I'm going to flash through these. You will have all of these slides to be able to access to. Design all ages faith formation around intergenerational church life events. We're going to go through each one of these here in just a minute. In fact, we'll just do that now. Yeah, there we go. All right, here we go. So what you have to do is you have to have these different events that you got to plan those well. You got to prepare for them well. Once you go through it, then you've got to assess it. How did this work? And then come back and modify what you need to. This is very intentional. This is not something that, okay, well, we're just going to see if we can put all generations in a room and it's going to happen. You have to plan for this. How are we going to do this? What worked? What didn't work? And by the way, when you're answering those questions, don't have all the silverbacks in the room. You better get some other generational, get some of your kids in the room to answer this question. All right, transform multi-generational into intergenerational, from the factions into together. Every church has multi-generational environments in which at least 2 generations are participating in an event on Sunday, Sunday worship, so forth. How can you transform? Now, this is when it becomes questions because everyone's church is a little bit different. The reason you don't see a cookie cutter, hey, here, y'all do this stuff and this will work, because every church is different. Every congregation, is different as well. So you have to ask yourself these questions. How can we transform in our particular situation? Relationships. How will the generations interact with each other and get to know each other and share stories with each other? That's a crucial question. You have to design it. You become teachers during lesson time. That's what you become. How will the experience incorporate intentional relationship building activities? So you have to talk about that piece of it as well. How will everyone feel welcomed and safe today? And many of you are doing a great job. I met a dear lady just yesterday. Is Linda Soto? Are you here today? Didn't think she'd be able to make it back. And doing wonderful things in her church with this. Making everybody feel safe and welcome. Okay? How will the experience engage generations in shared activities and in generational appropriate activities? Okay? So, what is not generationally appropriate? Okay? Okay? Boomers, you don't need to be playing flag football. Okay? So, may not be good. How will each generation be involved in leadership roles appropriate to their gifts, abilities, and age? How do you learn how to become a leader? You got to exercise it. If you don't ever give these kids a little bit of leadership, and just one step at a time, give them a little bit, give them a little bit, give them a little bit, have somebody mentoring them along the way, and that's how you grow your leaders. You grow your own. Not the way you did back in Woodstock. How will the leadership team engage multiple generations? And then inclusion. How will each generation feel valued and recognized in the experience? These are questions to ask about your congregation. How will each generation feel valued and recognized? And that's something that sometimes it's soft words, it's soft skills. It's not hard copy that I can really put my hands on. It's intangible. So how do I feel valued? There's a book that was and I'll talk about it in a little bit in the next presentation, written by Trent and Smalley. I think I mentioned it yesterday, called The Blessing, about making people feel valued. And one of the elements of the blessing is to be able to speak value into a person's life. So let's make sure that we're doing that. Age-specific programs and activities. How can you transform age-specific programs by adding intergenerational activities? We have age-specific stuff. All our second graders are over here. All our third graders are over there. They're age-specific. Doesn't mean they're necessarily bad, but it's a little bit more fragmentation. This is a different design. It's a different model. Okay? Adding intergenerational activities. How can you incorporate another generation in sharing their faith, wisdom, and interest in the program? So let's hear from them. Let's give them a voice in your church, in your congregation. Now, am I saying that you put them up there behind the pulpit for a sermon? That's not the same thing. But to give them a voice in their, especially within their peer group, and then even with the older people in the room as well. Validate them with that. How can you add mentors or spiritual guides to a program? So a grandparent mentors a young parents or spiritual guides for young people. One of the best things we ever did, my son and I, when he was a wee lad, he's 37 now, but we did something called Christian Service Brigade. And it's a lot like Boy Scouts, obviously from a Christian perspective. But here's the deal. You can't send your son. You got to bring him. That means it's you. And I feel duped, and they had absolutely manipulated all of us into thinking this was for the kids. When in reality, this is training for the dads. Actually, I thought it was a great program. Do things where kids are interacting with older people and vice versa. It was a wonderful program. Replacing age-specific for intergenerational. How can you incorporate regular intergenerational gatherings into your age group program schedule throughout the year? So consider redesigning your program. This is going to take a considerable amount of thought. Design new intergenerational initiatives. Again, create programs, activities, and experiences that bring together all of them where they're celebrating, they're praying, they're reading the Bible, serving and working for justice, worshiping, and more. These are the greatest needs and opportunities for creating new initiatives, where there are greatest needs, and what will contribute towards building intergenerational culture in your church. And that's what we're talking about, is the culture itself. So, and again, we'll look at these 5 areas. Celebrating. How do you celebrate the milestones throughout life and intergenerational experiences? These are checklists to go through as you begin to have these discussions in your church. And guys, we have to be very intentional about this. We can't just go, hey, let's just put everybody together in the room. Let's be very intentional about it. We'll talk about that here in just a second. The learning aspect of it, praying, of course, and then serving. Again, serving is sort of your low-hanging fruit. You can get kids involved in that way. You get adults involved in that way, too. And frankly, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And then take pictures, and you put those on your social media and things like that, and people go, wow, what's going on in that church? Old folks are with young folks. And young folks actually like it. So, intentional. And here's a hypothetical event. Have a gathering in prayer, all ages have a learning experience. Then you can have sort of breakout groups and in-depth learning experiences, and with whole groups, with age groups, kind of an activity center. And then they can get together and share their learning experiences and applications. That's just one example. It goes on and on and on. You're limited only by your creativity of you church team. Now here's where the rubber meets the road. How do you do this? How do you get this thing started? Form an intergenerational task force representing the essential ministries of the congregation. Be sure that all the generations are included from youth to older adults. Okay? Now, in the education setting, we would call this a District Educational Improvement Committee, something like that. Yeah, remember those? And in fact, last week I finished up a strategic planning for a district that we've been doing for actually about 3 months. And it's an exciting process. And that's what you see in number 2. Develop a strategic 5-year plan. And when you do that,
You have to have your values, your vision, and your mission. Okay? So obviously, according to your church's doctrine and your church constitution, that's going to do a whole lot to guide that. But what you see a lot of times, people say, well, this is our mission statement. Great. What's your vision? Well, we don't have a vision statement. Well, how do you know what to do? You don't know where you're going. Your mission statement tells you what you're doing. Your vision statement tells you where you're going. We're here today. We want to be here later on. That's our vision. That's where we're headed. That's our roadmap. So therefore, if that's our vision, here's our mission. This is what we must do in order to get there. We want to be an intergenerational church. That's our vision. Therefore, what must we do at this church, in this place, at this time? That's your mission statement. Well and good. How do you know where you're going? Well, you can't know where you're going until you know who you are. Well, who are we? Who are I? What describes who you are is your values. You show me what your values are, basically that's your identity. That's who you are. I value this, this, and this. Well, what if I take that one away? Okay, I've still got these other two, I'm okay. But what that tells me was that one thing wasn't really a value anyway. When I get to the point and I start asking you if I can take away some values, when you go, you can't have any more. Sorry, I'm not living without these. Those are your values. And that's what you truly value, and that's who you are. These are our values. Therefore, this is where we're going, and now here's what we're going to do. You walk into this intergenerational plan with a 5-year strategic. You can make it 3 years. It doesn't matter. You're going to check on it constantly. Another plan for another day. But anyway, that's a part of the intentional. When we say do things intentionally, this requires some work. It requires energy. It requires effort. Do you think it'd be worth it? I think so. I think so. If it gets you the results you're after. All right. Bishop's coming up. He's about to pull the cord under here. All right. Okay. Before I stop, I've got about 37 seconds here. Does anybody have a question for me at all? I've got the full slide deck on there. You can see that. I think Bishop's going to make sure that gets sent out. So anyway, didn't get to cover near as much as we needed to. But anyway, thank you for listening.